Welcome back to another episode of SmoothBrainEDH, where we make the smoothest plays with the biggest brains. We're back with another game with new commanders from Lost Caverns of Ixalan, so let's see what our players brewed up this week. Our first player today is Ethan on Ojer Axonil, Deepest Might. This is a mono red deck focused around dealing paper cuts worth of damage to opponents, but ramping it up with his commander's ability. Up next is Sam on Ojer Taq, Deepest Foundation. This is a mono white deck focused around just absolutely flooding the board with creature tokens and playing as many token doubling effects as possible. There is Caden on Abuelo, Ancestral Echo. This is an Azorius blink deck using Abuelo to repeatedly blink Caden's creatures every turn for value. Last up is Chandler on the partner pairing of Owen Grady, Raptor Trainer, and Blue, Loyal Raptor. This teamwork deck is all about dinosaurs, using Owen and Blue to put a ton of counters on other dinosaurs and power them up to monstrous heights.
Hey guys, quick editor side note, this deck was submitted by our lovely patron, Lion King Robbo. Thanks man, I had a great time playing this deck.
About to hop right into the game, but before that, go and give us a like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any of our new content. We have links to our social media, public Discord server, Decklists, and our Patreon in the description. We are partnered with Dragon Shield. Check out our affiliate link in the description if you look to pick up any sleeves, deck boxes, or playmats, and use code SMOOTH5 at checkout for 5% off your order. We're also partnered with Inked Gaming. Our affiliate link is also in the description if you look to pick any of custom playmats. Now, on to the gameplay.
Looks like Chandler wins the die roll, and this whole turn is just land to go. Chandler plays Ketria Triome, Ethan a Mountain, Sam Castle Ardenvale, and Caden will Fabled Passage for a Plains. Alright, back on Chandler's turn, and we actually see some spells. He'll shock in Steam Vents and cast Felwar Stone, then pass to Ethan. Ethan plays another mountain and casts Arcane Signet, then passes, and then Sam will just play Flagstones of Trokir, and then pass to Caden, who starts off with a Sea of Clouds, and then he'll cast Thought Vessel and pass to Chandler, who plays Path of Ancestry as land for turn, and then he'll cast Urza's Incubator, naming dinosaurs. The turn is now Ethan's, and he'll play a mountain and then drop Descent into Avernus. Dear Lord, this is going to get out of hand quick. He'll then pass the turn to Sam, who plays a basic Plains, then he'll cast Wand of the World Soul, which enters tapped, and then he'll pass the turn to Caden. Caden starts off with a basic island, then he'll cast Core Cartographer, which will find him a Hollowed Fountain, and then he passes the turn to Chandler, who will play a Command Tower as land for turn. And thanks to Urza's Incubator, he's able to cast both Owen Grady and Blue this turn. And Path of Ancestry will scry to the top, then the turn is passed to Ethan. And on his upkeep, everyone will make 2 treasure tokens and take 2 damage. Then he'll play a mountain as land for turn. Then he's able to Spectacle light up the stage. This exiles Chimlil, the Inner Sun, and Past in Flames. And then Ethan immediately taps for 6 and casts the Inner Sun. It resolves, and then he moves to his end step and discovers 5. It hits Erebor Flamesmith, which he'll cast. And then the turn is Sam's, who starts off with a Nykthos as land for turn. He'll then cast Morel, Shield of Argive. Then Sam will cast a Jeweled Lotus, which allows him to cast Ojer Taq this turn too. And then he'll pass the turn. Caden starts off by using his 2 treasures to cast Azorius Signet. Then he foretells a card. And then the turn is passed to Chandler. And he'll immediately activate Chris Pratt and put a haste counter on Blue. Then he'll tap for 2 and cycle Titanoth Rex. This draws him a card and will put a trample counter on Blue too. After this, he'll tap for 3 and cast Quartzwood Crasher. Path of Ancestry will scry him 1 to the bottom, and then when it enters the battlefield, it enters with a trample and haste counter. Then after this, Chandler will cast Bone Horde Dracosaur, and it also enters with trample and haste. Chandler then moves to combat, and he turns 16 trample at Ethan, and Ethan will take all 16. This will trigger the Quartzwood Crasher, which makes Chandler a 16/16 dinosaur that gets trample and haste. The turn is then passed to Ethan, and on his upkeep, everyone takes 4 damage and makes 4 treasure tokens. And Ethan sees that he is in the danger zone now, so he's kinda gotta try to win this turn. So he'll tap for 4 and cast Ojer Axonil. However, Caden does see that Ethan is very desperate right now and will probably try to do something crazy, so he'll respond by tapping for 2 and telling Ethan's dwarf to get lost. So it is destroyed and Ethan gets 2 map tokens. After this, Ethan will cast a Thrill of Possibility, discarding Vandal Blast to draw 2. He'll then play a mountain as land for turn, and with his Dwarf Pinger now gone, Ethan really can't do anything else this turn. So he'll move to his end step, discover 5, and it's a Fire Diamond, and then we move to Sam's turn. Sam will start off by tapping for 5 and casting Rabble Rousing. He'll hide away a card and then move to combat. 9 damage is swung at Caden, and Rabble Rousing and Morel trigger. Morel will make 3 1/1 Artifact Soldiers. Then Rabble Rousing makes 6 Citizens, and its hideaway card is cast. It's Anointed Procession, and then Sam will just pass the turn. Caden starts off with Deserted Beaches land for turn, and then he'll cast a Lord of Chains, drawing 3 cards upon ETB. Then after this, he casts Elite Guard Mage, drawing a card and gaining 3 life upon ETB. The turn is then passed to Chandler, and he has a Bone Horde Dracosaur trigger.
Alright, we got Avian Oddity and Temur Ascendancy.
And this will get him a treasure token. He'll then activate Star-Lord and put a Menace counter on Blue. After this, he'll cast Intrepid Paleontologist, and then he'll activate its ability to exile his Titanoth Rex in his graveyard, and then he casts the Titanoth Rex. It'll enter with a finality counter, and Sam decides to respond to the cast. He will Generous Gift blue. Chandler then moves to combat, and he swings his 16/16 Trample, and his Quartzwood Crasher at Ethan, and then he'll send 5 in the air over at Sam. And all the damage is just taken. Unfortunately for Ethan, he is dead here. There is a Quartzwood Crasher trigger too. And since he hit both Ethan and Sam, he should be getting 2 creatures out of this, but he accidentally just makes 1 giant creature. The turn is then passed to Sam, and he starts off with a Welcoming Vampire. Then he'll move to combat, and he full swings everything except his commander at Chandler. Attack triggers. With a doubling and tripling effect, he'll get 24 soldiers from Morel and 60 citizens from Rabble Rousing. On to blocking, Chandler blocks Morel with his Big, and then 3 1/1s of Sam's choice get put under his other creatures, and then he'll take 6. Oh yeah, and Sam would get a Welcoming Vampire trigger. The turn is then passed to Caden, and he top decks and slams Supreme Verdict. Cameron was behind him and can confirm, yes, this was his top deck. Caden will also hold priority and cast his foretold card, Cosmic Intervention. Sam will also respond to this by activating his Wand of the World Soul to give his next spell Convoke, and he'll tap all 86 of his creatures and 1 mana to cast Heliod's Intervention. X is 85 and gain 170 life, putting him at 199 total life. Then everything resolves and Chandler sheds a single tear. And it turns out Caden accidentally misread Cosmic Intervention. He thinks it only affects 1 creature, so instead of bringing back all 3 of his creatures, he only puts back Lord of Change, which still draws him 3 cards. So, and when Ojer Taq dies, it's supposed to come back as a land, but Sam forgets this, but he does realize on his next turn, and Chandler and Caden are chill, so they're cool with him fixing this. The turn is then passed to Chandler, and he'll start off with a Carplesson Forest, then he'll cast Runic Armasaur and scry 1 to the top with Path of Ancestry, then he'll tap for 5 and recast Andy Dwyer, and then he'll pass the turn to Sam. Sam plays Karoo as land for turn and bounces a plains back to his hand. Then he'll cast Charismatic Conqueror, an absolute house from the new set. He'll then pass, and Caden will cycle Irrigated Farmland on end step. Then on his turn, he'll tap for 3 and cast Abuelo. Then Sam misses his first Charismatic Conqueror trigger. But after this, Caden will evoke out Solitude. When it ETBs, he has the Evoke trigger, the Exile trigger, and Sam's Conqueror trigger. He will tap it, then he exiles the Conqueror, and then he'll respond to the Evoke trigger by activating Abuelo to blink it. Armasaur trigger. Caden then moves to combat and hits Sam for 6 in the air, and then he'll move to his end step, and when Solitude re-enters the battlefield, he'll exile Emmett from the Lego Movie. Then the turn is passed to Chandler, and he'll start off by casting Regal Behemoth. He'll scry 1 to the top off Path of Ancestry, and then become the Monarch. He'll then cast a Seedborn Muse, and then a Topiary Stomper, which gets him a Forest. Chandler will then hit Sam for 2, and then he'll pass the turn to Sam. And they both untap. Sam plays Plains, and then casts Soul Ring. And he's really got nothing he can do this turn, so he'll just pass the turn to Caden. And Caden will just drop Stonehorn Dignitary. He asks Chandler if he's swinging at Sam next turn, and Chandler says, yeah? So Caden will target Sam with the trigger. Then he'll tap for 4 and cast Teleportation Circle. Then he moves to combat and swings 9 at Sam. Then he'll move to his end step and blink his Lord of Change, drawing 3 cards. And he has to discard 1 on cleanup. He'll then pass to Chandler, who will cast a Farseek, and this finds him a tapped Breeding Pool. After this, he moves to combat and swings for 13 at Sam. Sam activates Castle Ardenvale to make 2 1/1s, and this draws Chandler a card off of his Armasaur, and then he'll take the 13 damage. Post-combat, Chandler will cast Blue and Peter Quill again, and then he'll pass the turn to Sam, and they all untap. Sam will start off by casting Ardenvale Fealty, making a 2/2 Knight with Vigilance. Psych, he gets 2 of them. Then after this, he casts the Virtue of Loyalty. Chandler then decides now's a good time to cast Return of the Wild Speaker to draw 5 cards. Then Sam passes the turn and his creatures get counters on end step. Now on Caden's turn, he'll play Idyllic Beachfront as land for turn, and then he'll cast an Arcane Signet. After this, he moves to combat and hits Sam in the air for 6, and then he'll move to his end step and blink his Lord of Change with Teleportation Circle to draw another 3. He has to discard 2 cards on cleanup, and then the turn is Chandler's, and he starts off with the Rejuvenating Springs as land for turn. After this, he'll cast a Nature's Lore, finding another forest to the battlefield untapped. Then he'll activate Mario to give Blue a haste counter. After this, he'll cast Ravenous Tyrannosaurus. It enters with a haste counter, and then he'll eat the Topiary Stomper to get 3 +1/+1 counters. Chandler then turns everything sideways at Sam for a total of 23 damage, and Ravenous Tyrannosaurus has an attack trigger. 9 damage is pointed at the Lord of Change, and Chandler does pay for the ward. And you better believe that Caden and his granddad have the Ephemerate. So the Lord of Change is blinked, and he'll draw another 3 cards upon ETB, and Chandler's Tyrannosaurus loses its target. Moving on to blocks, Sam will activate Nykthos to float 4 mana, and then activate Castle Ardenvale to make 2 humans. Now the Ravenous Tyrannosaurus doesn't have trample, so one gets put under the 9/9, and the other gets put under blue, and then he'll take 9. And Chandler draws a card from him activating his castle. Chandler then attempts to pass the turn, but Caden stops on his second main, and he'll activate Abuelo, drawing Chandler a card, and this will exile Stonehorn Dignitary. Now since Caden did this on Chandler's main phase, he's actually able to stay on his main phase now, and he'll cast the card he just drew, which is the Great Henge. And now with a better reason to cast the creatures in his hand, he'll cast Hunting Velociraptors to draw a card, and it gets a counter. He'll then cast a Delighted Halfling and do the same thing, and that draws him into one of my favorite dinosaurs, Nezahal. The turn is then passed, and Caden's Stonehorn Dignitary comes back and makes Sam skip his next combat step. Sam unfortunately really can't do much, so he'll just pass the turn, and Caden will stop on second main again to activate Abuelo, drawing Chandler a card, and he'll exile Solitude, and then we move to end step, and Solitude comes back and targets Chandler's Runic Armasaur, but Chandler will Heroic Intervention this. Then Sam's Virtue of Loyalty trigger will resolve, and we move to Caden's turn. Ephemerate happens again, and it targets Solitude, which targets Runic Armasaur. Oh yeah, Nezahal trigger. After this, Caden will play a Reliquary Tower as land for turn, then he'll cast a Soul Ring. Nezahal trigger. Then he activates Abuelo and exiles his Stonehorn Dignitary. After this, he'll move to combat and swing for 2 in the air at Chandler, and 6 in the air at Sam. He steals the Monarchy, and then moves to his end step, where Stonehorn Dignitary comes back and makes Chandler skip his next combat phase. Teleportation Circle and Lord of Change will also draw him 3 more cards. And then we're on to Chandler's turn. He'll start by activating Garfield to give blue a reach counter, and then he slams Last March of the Ints, which draws him 9 cards. Then he'll put in Carnage Tyrant, Wrathful Raptors, and that's it. But after this, he will sacrifice Hunting Velociraptors to cast Savage Order. There's a lot of cool options he could go for in his deck, but nothing really gets him out of the lockdown Caden's put him and Sam in. Not in dinosaur form, at least. But he does find a way that he could potentially draw into a way out, and that is Earthshaker Dreadmaw. And between the Dreadmaw and the Great Henge, he'll draw a total of 7 cards here. Then after this, he'll cast Rampaging Ferostodon. Now this is actually a creature that threatens Caden a little bit, so he decides to Confounding Riddle it, and Chandler can't pay for it, so it is countered. Chandler then attempts to pass the turn, but Caden's got Abuelo shenanigans with Ghostly Flicker to Solitude and Stonehorn Dignitary, and when they come back on end step, Regal Behemoth is exiled, and Sam will skip his next combat. Sam also activates Castle Ardenvale on end step to make 2 1/1s. Now on Sam's turn, he'll activate Nykthos, and then float to 7 mana and cast Elesh Norn. Abuelo, Solitude, and Owen Grady will all die from this. He then plays a Plains as land for turn. Sam will then pass the turn, but Caden stops on end step to Stroke of Midnight Elesh Norn. Chandler, however, has a response, and he will offer you can't refuse it. Also, he will draw off Nezahal from the Stroke of Midnight. The turn isn't passed, and Sam's creatures get more counters on end step. Caden will then play and fetch with a Flooded Strand for a Tundra, and then cast Kitesail Larcenist. And when it ETBs, it'll transform Elesh Norn and Seedborn Muse into treasures with no abilities. This allows Caden to recast his Abuelo, who is then immediately activated on Stonehorn Dignitary. He'll then move to combat and swing for 6 in the air at Chandler, who forgot he has reach creatures, and so he'll just take the 6, but then he'll activate Great Henge to gain 2 back. He'll then move to end step, and Stonehorn Dignitary comes back and makes Chandler skip his next combat, and then Teleportation Circle will blink Lord of Change, and he'll draw 3 cards. On Chandler's turn, he'll cast the Ozolith, and then play Rockfall Vale. He'll then cast Galta Primal Hunger, then Otepec Huntmaster, then Atali Primal Conqueror, and these all should enter with 1/1 counters. Chandler does realize that in a bit. ETB triggers. He'll draw a card, and Atali gets a counter, and then he hits Ancient Gold Dragon, Lauren of the Third Path, and Blasphemous Act off of Atali. Chandler puts Blasphemous Act on the top of the stack, so it'll resolve first, and Caden sees what's going on here. There's a Wrathful Raptors on the field. If this Blasphemous Act resolves, he's dead. But he's got Teferi's protection, and he casts it. Nezahal trigger, and Chandler remembers to discard 3 cards to save Nezahal. So now Caden and all of his permanents are gone, and Elesh Norn and Seedborn Muse aren't treasures anymore. Then all creatures are dealt 13 damage, and the board is wiped. But then, 7 Wrathful Raptors triggers are put on the stack, and there's no Caden to point them at, so 91 damage is pointed at Sam. But dude's fine, he's still chilling at 59. The Ancient Gold Dragon and Lauren of the Third Path will then resolve, and Lauren will hit Anointed Procession. There's also a ton of counters put on the Ozolith, so many and such a big variety that Chandler decides to just write it down on a notepad. But unfortunately for him, he'll never even get to put those counters on a creature because Stonehorn Dignitary exists, so he can't move to combat. After this though, he'll cast Skull Spore Nexus, which is a really cool card. Then Chandler will pass the turn, and on end step, Nezahal comes back and Sam activates Castle Ardenvale. Then on his turn, he'll play War Room as land for turn and immediately activate it to draw a card and lose a life. And it's at this point that Chandler and Sam are pretty confident there's no way they can come out from under Caden's lock, and Caden decides to just show them his hand, which has a ton of amazing cards in it, but the one that causes Sam and Chandler to decide to scoop is Agent of Treachery, which means Caden's just going to be able to steal all their permanents, and with no permanents and no combats, there's no way they can win here. So they'll scoop, and the winner is Caden and his grandfather Abuelo. Now that was a pretty exciting game. It's been a while since I've seen a control deck win in EDH. It's hard to keep track of 3 other players. But with Ethan's hyper combo deck, it allowed Caden to sit back and let the aggro decks deal with him, and then he got ahead in value. All the decks played today are absolutely amazing. Ethan's Ojer Axonil deck can absolutely pop off, and if it had that dwarf that one turn, he would have got close to winning. Sam went absolutely insane by multiplying all of his creature tokens by 6, and dinosaurs just did dinosaur things. So altogether, I think this was an amazing game. Let us know what you guys thought down in the comments below, and while you're down there, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. But that's enough for this Ixalan insanity today. Hope you guys enjoyed, and have a smooth day.